I want to read several verses of Scripture, and then I'm preaching and quoting. These are the last few verses of the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. Chapter number 50, verse number 24. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you. I want you to remember that. God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto a land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, watch this, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him. And this is the first time you find the word coffin in the Bible. And they put him in a coffin in Egypt. I think you know the story how Joseph was sold into slavery at approximately the age of 13. From the age of 13 to the age of 30, he went through many dramatic events in the land of Egypt. Finally, Joseph found his way to Pharaoh and the kingship, and he was second only to Pharaoh. And so what was left of the land of Israel came and lived in Egypt. And they survived together, and they served together. And the Israelite nation began to multiply there in the land of Egypt. And here it is now, Joseph, 110 years old, and he's dying. And he said on his deathbed 2 times, God will surely visit you. That is a promise that God was going to come after his people one day. From the time that Joseph died until this promise of a deliverer was 400 years. They were in bondage without an encouraging word of deliverance. If you take the 40 years they wandered in the wilderness as a generation, that means 10 generations of the Israelite people were born into the land of slavery. There they were in the land of Egypt without any hope of ever being set free of what turned into bondage. You see, when Joseph went down to Egypt and became second to Pharaoh, and all the Israelites moved to Egypt, they were not in bondage, but the Pharaoh died, and another Pharaoh rose up, the Bible said, that knew not Joseph. And instead of inhabiting together, the people of Egypt put the Israelites into slavery. After the death of Joseph, several things changed in the land of Egypt. And it caused the children of God to pray and to plead with God to give them freedom from the land that they were therein. The same evidences of Egypt back in that day when God's people cried out for deliverance seems to be the same reasons why in the day that we are living in, that God's people all over this country are praying for help and for God to send a deliverer to take us out of one land and lead us into another. So twice Joseph said on his deathbed, God will surely visit you. He was telling them it may not be right away, and it may not be when you think, but help is on the way. Jesus went away 2,000 years ago and said he would come back again. Generations have come and gone and died to the point now where people are not even expecting him. They don't even believe it. And the Bible said they cry out, where is the promise of his coming? But he left us with that promise he will come again. And just like he's fulfilled every other promise in the Bible, you can mark her down. I don't know where and I don't know when, but Jesus is coming again. Now I want to show you the things that was happening nation and worldwide that caused the children of Israel to beg for deliverance. For too long, the children of God have got comfortable in a godless, carnal world. But God is beginning to allow things to transpire within our nation and within our land and within our world that is bringing even the most cold and distant children of God to their knees to beg God to get us out of this land and take us to another. Here's why Egypt got so corrupt. You tell me if it sounds like America. Number one, because they had a changed generation. Well, the Bible said in Exodus chapter number 1 and verse 8 that after Joseph died, another Pharaoh took over the land of Egypt, and he knew not Joseph. He didn't know about the dreams. He didn't know about the blessings. He didn't know about the power of God. He didn't know about Jehovah. He didn't know about the deliverer of Israel. He knew not Joseph. And this Pharaoh came in with a different flavor, with a different direction, with a different appetite, with a different mindset, with a different thought pattern. When you read through the 400 years that Israel was in bondage, only 2 of the pharaohs are really mentioned in detail. It was the Pharaoh that first put them in bondage and slavery, and the second one is the Pharaoh that was in charge of Egypt when the Israelites left in that great day of Exodus when they crossed the Red Sea. You understand the name Pharaoh was not a personal name, like we have the name president. Barack Obama was a president. Donald J. Trump is the president. But we call them all presidents. So it is with the Pharaohs. That was the name of leadership. And they had come in, and these Pharaohs were a little bit different than the old timers. If you don't see the flavor of our country going in another direction, you need to see a psychiatrist and an eye doctor, because I'm telling you, there's another generation coming on. And they're changing this country so fast that even the fake news media can't keep up with it. There were 3 things they started doing in Egypt when the new generation moved in that I want to mention to you. Number 1, there was a dictatorship in their government. Instead of being leaders and examples and in serving the people, they slowly took over the lives of the working people there in the land of Egypt. There were 2 ways that they disabled the people of Israel from rising up against them. Number 1, the people of Israel were not allowed to have any weapons at all. There were no smiths in the lands. And that's where we get our word from, smiths, as making metal. In other words, there was nobody that was able to make spears. Nobody was ever to make staves. Nobody could make knives. And what the nation had done is they had slipped in and took out the people's opportunity, freedom, and right to defend themselves, because they were not allowed to have any weaponry. Now, I'm not dogmatic and I'm not a freak and I don't run around with a machine gun on each shoulder. But I am telling Pelosi and the rest of that crowd, you're not getting my guns. I paid for my guns. They belong to my guns. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a law-abiding citizen. And hell will sell ice cream before them bunch of liberal devils get my gun. Now, for those of you that think the Constitution is a coloring book, you need to sit down and get off Facebook long enough to read it. One of the reasons why our forefathers empowered us to have guns was if a corrupt government came up in our country, we the people were to run them off and start all over again. Amen, that's right. But what Egypt did is they had got Israel into the place where they were not able to defend themselves. The second thing they did to keep the Israelites in bondage is they were not allowed to talk about it. They not only took their ability to defend themselves, but they did not allow them to discuss being different, being tired, wanting to go back to the way it was. If I could say this, they took their freedom of speech away from them. They were not allowed to talk about being a free nation. They were not allowed to defend themselves. And again, I'm not here to make you mad. I'm trying to tell you how bad off we are. But if I want to wear a Trump t-shirt and a Make America Great Again hat and you don't like it, you can suck an egg that big around. It's none of your business. That's none of your business. That's my freedom of speech. I'm not trying to harm you. You can wear any t-shirt you want. You can vote for a goat, a monkey, or a jackass if you want to. And if you go Democrat, that's about what you're doing. But when you take people's right to defend themselves and you take their right and their freedom of speech, you are headed for slavery, ladies and gentlemen. There was a dictatorship in the government. The second thing that I see in a changed generation is they were destroying their babies. It was here in the land of Egypt. In chapter number 1 and verse number 16, Pharaoh made a decree. The people of the nation were not even allowed to vote on it. He said, every male child that's born to the Israelite people, you're to take that newborn boy, take him to the Nile River, and throw him to a watery grave. How could anybody with any sanctity of life, any human character and decency about them, take a weeping newborn baby from the womb of a mother and throw it in the Nile River and watch the alligators consume that small bloody body in just one gulp? You talk about heartless. You talk about godless. You talk about ridiculous reprobates. That's what was happening here in the land of Egypt. They were destroying all their babies. Who in the world ever dreamed that in New York this past week that our country would stoop so low down and sorry that the mayor would sign in the law that a woman can be 9 months pregnant, on her way to delivery, inject that baby with poison and kill it as it's being delivered from her womb. Now, I want to say to the mayor, I want to say to every Democrat, I want to say to New York City, you're a bunch of murderers. You're a bunch of bloody-handed murderers. You are a murderer in the sight of God. How can any nation that's killing their newborn declare to be a godly nation? Sad to say, I saw the video with my own eyes. When the mayor signed this into law, the Congress of the state of New York gave him a standing ovation as Hillary lifted his hand in hers, declaring victory for human rights. I was talking and debating somebody 2 weeks ago on this thought. And a lady said to me, she said, you know, it's a funny thing, you guys, you conservatives are hypocrites. She said, you're against abortion, but you're for the death penalty. And she said, it seems to me like either way you're taking a life, whether it's in the womb or whether it's in the jail cell. Both of it is taking a life. So how can you be pro-life and still believe in the death penalty, which I do, by the way. And I want everybody to know that's watching and listening, I do. Now, for those of you that smoke dope and don't know the difference, let me give it to you. A man in prison is facing the death penalty because of what he has done. That baby in that womb has done nothing. It has done nothing. That baby deserves an opportunity to live just like you do, just like I do, and just like everybody else does. You better believe I'm pro-life. You better believe I'm pro-death penalty. These men that have picked up these little kids and molested them and butchered them and killed them and held them like animals, you better believe they ought to kill every one of them. I don't think it's fair to go to jail for 60 years and my tax dollars have to feed them bunch of demon-possessed devils. We'd start hanging some of this crowd on Main Street. I think we'd stop some of this nonsense that's going on in our country. Amen, that's right. Now, I know you bunch of pussyfoot liberal pansies don't like it, but somebody ought to be telling you the truth. It's not right to kill the unborn and let a bunch of perverts live and support them in the process. There's a dictatorship. You know when I'm gone a week and I get home, it's rough. They were destroying their babies. And let me give you this. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wrote this down. 3 o'clock in the morning, I said, God, if I miss this, I'll forget it. I got to watch this. Why did Pharaoh want all the male children killed? Because he was trying to do away with masculinity. He wanted everybody to be soft. He wanted everybody to be laid back. He wanted everybody to be in pink and high heels and lipstick and curled hair. Oh, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. It just wasn't to get rid of babies. They were trying to raise a generation with no masculinity. And I'm going to tell you something, bless God. I don't need a razor blade company trying to tell me what a man is and how a man is supposed to act. You need to shut up. You need to shut up. I'd let my wife grow hair under her arms before I'd buy another blade from them bunch of egg-sucking liberals. And that's saying a lot. They're trying to take the masculinity out of this world. Boys don't even know if they're a boy or a girl anymore. They don't even know what bathroom to go to. And when they get bored, they're eating Tide Pods. And by God, what's going on in our country? You got girls trying to be boys and boys trying to be girls, and you got transgender and no gender and neutral gender and that gender. You don't even know what in the Sam hell you are anyhow. But I tell you what God said. He made male and God made female. That's what the Bible said. And God made them that way. No masculinity in the land. Destroying the babies. Dictatorship government. They put deliberate taxation on the people according to chapter 1 and verse number 12. Pharaoh got mad at them because they were talking about leaving and being set free. And he greatly afflicted them. You know the story. Took the straw. Made them make the same amount of brick, but they had to gather the straw. This country is the only country in the world that penalizes and punishes their people for prosperity and becoming an asset to our community and our country. But now we have a new generation of leaders that wants to tax us more and give it to a sorry crowd that wants to lay on the couch and watch television and let the government take care of them and never have to work for a living. Now, if somebody needs assistance, you better believe I'm for it. I gladly pay my taxes for people that are hurting. For people that have afflicted children, they need assistance. For women that their husband is killed, they need assistance. For people that just have physical handicaps, mental issues, yes, they need assistance. That's what this program is for. I don't want you to think I'm an elitist and think that if you can't make a good living, you're not worth being an American. I don't believe that. I do help people. I believe in helping people. I give more money away every year than you make every year. So don't come to me telling me I don't believe in helping people. I do believe in helping people. But I am sick and tired of these girls starting to have babies at 13 and having a baby every 9.5 months and laying up on welfare, shacking up with a guy so she can keep getting her check, and nobody works and nobody's got any discipline, and they lay around all day and they stay up all night, then they sleep all day, and we buy all their food, we pay all their bills, all their hospitalization, all their eye care, all their dental care, just because they're sorry. Now, here's what the Bible said. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat. If we cut some of these fat boys off and quit paying their bills, when that slob got hungry enough, I promise you, he would crawl out from his empty Dorito bags on the couch and put his shoes on and go make a living somewhere. Now, I know some of you are coming back and you think I care. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not afraid to tell it like it is, and I'm telling it just exactly how it is. This country is in a mess. And I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I think they're all low down and sorry. I think the Republicans are a bunch of pansies. And if they're not transgender, they need to quit acting like it. You need to put your big boy britches on and get back in the House and the Senate and do what we sent you there to do and quit worrying about what everybody else thinks about it. Just do your job. 6 months of my paycheck last year in 2018, I found out through my CPA, from January 1st to June 16th, every dime I made this past year is taxes. We are in a mess. Number two, I must hurry. I not only want to show you a changed generation, I want to show you a critical situation. Now I want to ask you a question. Why did God send all these plagues to Egypt before he would allow Pharaoh to let Israel go? You remember God told Moses, he said, by the way, I've hardened Pharaoh's heart. So he's not going to let the kids ain't going nowhere. But I did it for a reason. Why did God harden Pharaoh's heart and make the children of Israel go through and witness the 10 plagues found in the book of Exodus. Well, there was a reason. Every one of those plagues, and I don't have time to get into all of them, was a false god that the Egyptians worshipped. You see, the critical situation was Egypt was open to multiple gods and all different ways of approaching God in worship. And every pagan religion in the world found a resting place in Egypt because they had liberty to promote their false propaganda. So God said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how fake this stuff is before I show you how real I am. So let me borrow a few of the plagues that God brought upon the land of Egypt in this critical situation. You remember when Moses smote the waters and the waters turned to blood. And the Bible said that the fish were washed up by the billions dead on the muddy banks of the river. Why did God do that? Because the Egyptians worshipped a fish god called Hamtumet. It was half woman and it was half fish, kind of like a mermaid. And it was their god of protection. And they felt like as long as there was the fish god in Egypt, then all the people of Egypt were protected by this pagan god. And so God said, oh, you think that's the God that's protecting you? I'll show you something. And he lined the Nile River and all the waterways, and all the fish were laying up against the bank, and all of them were dead. And they thought to themselves, there's our fish God. But in spite of the fact that we got a fish God, we're still in bondage. The fish God didn't help. You remember when the magicians came down and Aaron was standing there with Moses. You see, they had a magic god that was also a pharmaceutical god called Heka. And it was a god of magic. And you remember Moses and Aaron came down, and Aaron took his rod and said, hey, Pharaoh, watch this. And he threw it down and it became a snake. Pharaoh said, that ain't nothing. So he called in all of his musicians. And here come these magicians, and they set in, and here's the god of Heka. The God that can deliver you. The God that'll watch over you. Here's the God that'll make sure everything's all right. And all of those magic men threw their rods down like Aaron. And all of theirs became snakes. And Pharaoh said, see, our God's as powerful as yours. And all of a sudden, Aaron's snake said, Lord, bless this food I'm about to receive. And the Bible said he ate every one of those snakes that Pharaoh's men threw on the ground. God said, oh, you think the God of magic can deliver you? There he is. But you're still in bondage. And then they had the god of frogs. He was called Hegat. And it was a god of fertility because of reproduction. It was a sex god. Because when the Nile would overflow, hundreds of thousands of frogs would come out of the Nile River. So they worshiped the god Hekek. That was one of their most prominent gods that they worshiped because they had a free sex movement going on. So that was their big-time god. And God said, oh, you think the frog will set you free? No problem. He said, Moses, cast your rod out across Egypt. And the Bible said when he did, the land was filled with frogs. Billions of them, Brother Doug. Everywhere you step, there's a frog. When you laid in the bed, it was full of frogs. When you open the refrigerator, it was full of frogs. When you opened the oven, it was full of frogs. When you sat on the toilet, it was full of frogs. When you got your chariot, it's full of frogs. The yard was full of frogs. The couch was full of frogs. Billions of frogs all across the land. But guess what? Your frog god left you in Egypt. Yes, but what about the locust god? The god of Seth. The locust god was a grasshopper with a head like a fly, and it had wings. And it could fly instead of jump around. Surely the locust god will set us free. It was the god that controlled the storms. So God sends in swarms of millions of flies to inhabit the people. Flies around their head. Flies around their feet. Flies all in their chariot. Flies all in their house. And billions of flies everywhere. But Egypt's still in bondage. Israel's still in bondage in Egypt. But they had a sun god. Oh, we know the sun god. They worshiped 6 different sun gods. Moses stretched his rod toward the sun, and it went black for 3 solid days. Where's your son God at now? I'll tell you where it is. It left you in bondage. And God was showing them that every god and everything they worshiped outside of them was not able to bring them sweet deliverance. Which brings me to my third point. There's a coming evacuation. When they said hope is all gone, we'll never get out of this godless world. They'll keep killing babies. The government will keep running over us. They're going to tax us to death. We're not going anywhere. God said, I got somebody coming. You remember what Joseph said? Help is on the way. Stepping over comes a man named Moses. Did you know Moses is a type of Jesus 357 different ways? Dr. Billy Canoy taught me in the Old Testament. And when hope was all gone, in stepped a man and said, God has raised me up. And he sent me down here to set his people free. And they said, well, who gets to go with you, Moses? He said, I tell you who gets to go. Everyone that's got the blood applied. Everybody. Everybody. I said everybody that's got the blood applied. You're getting out of Egypt. Hey. Jehovah's Witness knocked on my door and said, did you know we're going to inherit the earth? I said, you can have the sucker. This world is not my home. Joseph said he's taken me out of one land and put me in a much better land. Cheer up, child of God. If the blood's been applied, there's a better day a coming. We're not home yet. Now watch this, and I got to close. Moses said, I tell you who's going. Not only those that have had the blood applied, but also those that have died in faith. Remember what Joseph said, Brother McCarty? Here's what he said. He said, I die, and they're going to bury me in Egypt. But God's going to send a deliverer. And when you boys pull out of here, don't you leave me in Egypt. I know I'm dead, but I died in the same faith you're living with. You pull my body out of Egypt, and you take it to that better land. You know what's wonderful? Not only when Jesus comes is he coming after those that are alive, but all of those that died in the faith that we now live in, he's carrying them out as well. They're getting up out of that grave, and we're going to a far, far better land. I tell you this in closing. Brother Joe Hammonds is here, and I love him so much. What a Christian. What a guy. I was preaching one time on getting to heaven, and I said, some of you here, maybe you had a child that passed away as a baby. Maybe you never got to see it grow up or hear it talk or watch it walk. It came out of a message I preached called The Glimpse of Glory, where I borrow your imagination and take you to heaven. And in the poem it says this. A little girl came running up to me, and this is what she said. You don't remember me, Daddy. You thought I was born dead. Everybody on earth thought I only died. But Daddy Jesus brought me to heaven, and it's here I'll ever abide. And Brother Joe, it's been years ago. I don't even know if you remember. You came to me and said, Brother Kid, I had a little boy that died. My boy died. And he said, I never knew till tonight that when I get to heaven, that little boy that never got to talk to me, that little boy that never got to walk with me, that little boy that never got to know me. It's so good to know, Brother Kid, when I get to the other side, Brother Joe, you're not only going to join hands with your wife, and she's not going to have Alzheimer's anymore, and she's not going to be sick, and she's not going to be in a bed, but you're going to hug on a boy that you never really got to know, because God's taken us all out of this land to a far, far better land. Let me say this in closing. To all of you bigots and God-hating, reprobate, lying liberals that are listening to me, you hear me well. You have not seen the last of Jesus. You may have seen him in a crib. You may have seen him on a cross. You may have seen him in a cemetery. But the next time you see him, he's going to be on a cloud. And he's coming as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Give Jesus a hand clap of praise.